right. Welcome back to the Partnership Mastermind podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lavoie. In this episode, we're going to cut through the noise and get real about building partner ecosystems that actually move the needle. Today's guest has been in the trenches, from turning around struggling UK gyms to scaling Vend's APAC growth to running Xero's app marketplace, and now advising 60 plus companies through his own firm, Hockey Stick Advisory. We have Bryan Williams with us today. Bryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. Good to be here.
Amazing. Well, look, we start each episode off with 5 quick-hitting questions to warm you up, especially since it's early for you, and get the audience a chance to get to know you a bit better before we get into the meaty stuff. You ready for that?
Yep, that's good enough.
Okay, cool. So first things first, it's 6 a.m. there, right in Melbourne, and you've got a big client call. What's in your coffee mug?
Oh, well, yeah, I'm absolutely caffeinated right now, ready to go. So,
Love it.
Yeah,
Love it.
No, all good, mate.
Okay, well, so then what's your, okay, then tell us about is it just standard coffee or anything fancy?
No, nothing fancy this time of day. It was something quick and easy, and I'm working from my back office at home today, so I also got to keep the kids from waking up as well. So snuck one in.
Fair enough.
So, fair enough for this.
Fair enough. Cool. All right, next question for you. In a few words, how would your old gym colleagues describe you back then?
Oh, yeah, good question. A long time ago now. Curious, growth-minded, aspirational, I suppose.
Well, that paid off. Well, it seems like they had foresight then, given where you're at now in your career. Next one is, and I love asking this question, what's the most repeatable, boring, but effective partnership play you've seen work over and over and over again?
That is a great question. I'd say it's the ability to show and lead with value ongoing and lead with that. Just yesterday I was working with a client call, and I just kept asking the question, why would that person partner with you? Beyond the company, What would that person, what would it look like? Keep drawing it out. You've got to make sure that you're showing value to them, for them to achieve whatever they care about, whether in-month KPI, OKR, or what it could be, and make sure you're nailing it time and time again.
And this is an aside, not the next question, but like in your experience, like that sounds so obvious to people like ourselves, but like, why is that not more obvious for a lot of other partner leaders now they're building their program?
Everyone always thinks about what's in front of them and what they care about. As in, like, I need to go hit partner source revenue, partner influence revenue. I need to do that today. So, but partnerships unfortunately defaults to go find business right now. And so people in the role, especially individual contributors, always going with that mindset and kind of forget the other side of it, which is also the opportunity for you and I to go out and educate the market that there's a better way to do it, right?
I love that. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it's a really difficult skill to develop, this like foresight and like zoomed out strategic thinking. We're always thinking transactionally, like, hey, we got to hit our quota cycle this quarter. So I'd rather do that, instead of like kind of pursuing a longer term strategy. So, and we're going to unpack that a little bit more later today. The next question for you is, what's one partnership myth you wish would die already?
Into a leadership team that there's a fire hose of customers willing to send us all of their business next week. It's such the default. The go-to-market, the CRO, the CEO, they've got a revenue gap. Go chat to insert company next week and bring it back immediately. That's the default, unfortunately, and we've all got to work together that are in the industry to rework that around what is the role of partnerships and how to go about it. Yeah,
I'm glad you said that, and we'll dive into that a bit later on, of like the relationship between the partnership leader and the kind of the C-suite and certainly the CEO, like managing up, expectation setting, training them basically on like what this role really looks like, I think is critical. Otherwise, they're going to get frustrated, impatient, and probably move off of you. So we'll definitely unpack that a bit later. The final question, it's a light one to get done this quick hitter round, is if you weren't in partnerships, running your own business, you could do anything you want, right? Not in the corporate business world. What would you be doing?
Oh, like any sort of dream things?
Anything.
I always like getting out in nature and adventures. So some sort of adventure company, traveling more of the world, which I've pleasantly been able to sort of see a lot of. But yeah, just keep that going now with my kids.
Amazing. Love that. Cool. Well, now we're the training wheels are off. Audience now has a better sense of you. So now we're going to get into the meat of the conversation. And the way I typically approach these interviews is I really want the audience to kind of get to know you kind of linearly, like from your kind of journey, so they can see kind of that path. Because I think we both know in the training market, people want to understand how people they admire got to where they got to,
Yeah,
right? So I
sure.
do want to kind of start in order. So let's go from gym floors to kind of global SaaS, right? And rewind for a second. Because your path is like a lot of others. It's not typical, right? And
No.
so take us back to the UK, the gym turnaround, the finance referral plays, and then that jump into Vend and eventually leading ecosystem growth at Xero. So like, just kind of take us back. Like, what was your journey like?
Yeah, origin story. Yeah. So, beyond the working in gyms in the UK, Chris, I sort of rewind. I had the opportunity to work in a pure outbound role in starting off in Germany and Luxembourg and then Middle East, and outbound role being commission only, spreadsheets, books, of a list, working with companies who set up all around the world where expats are. And the goal is that expats typically earn 30 to 40% more revenue than you would in your home country, which is why you'd move there. So you've only got
Right.
this source of money. What do you do with it? Where do you spend it? So these financial advisor companies would set up with like, well, let's go set up retirement planning, superannuation. Let's put that money to good use. There's a captive market here to do it. So in a foreign country, like, how do you go and find these people? So, these are the days before Apollo, Lucia, Firmable and everything that sort of go out, and no drip flows inbound. So, it was a boiler room call center. I was working there, a few years at university with the goal to earn as much commission money as I could and work my ass off so I could travel more, back to my point earlier. But, making 100+ calls a day gets pretty old pretty quick. And, there was a
Definitely.
mandate of make enough calls, this many will answer, you get this many objections for it. And I thought, it's got to be a better way to do this. So, I went and ordered every referral strategy book, every kind of management, book around how can we generate referrals with and through partners? What can we do around events? And the baptism by fire of, I learned, through grinding and working, figuring it out that, there was a way that I could fill diaries, I could book meetings without banging the phone, right? And for that, Chris, was, in terms of building in our call scripts and our events, things like, all right, well, we're going to spend time today to look at your financial advisory situation. If that's of value, Chris, there's only one way we're going to ask for some help. If you can provide 2 or 3 referrals at the end of this meeting, if you see a value, would that be okay? And I went through a methodology and built a sales process and a framework where we could actually unlock referrals at the back of it. And then what we did, we got very good at it. And then we started to build compounding referrals out the back of every meeting. So then the next meeting would do it as well. And then all of a sudden the diaries are overflowing. We're working with a few advisors. We had deep respect within huge organizations. And we really went to market with doing that. And so I think with that just sort of basic evolution there, to your point before, everyone falls into partnerships. You come from sales, marketing, customer success, as the
Yep.
origin story typically. And that was where it was a real light bulb moment for me, which has followed me throughout my career to date. And that's where into the, expanding a gym in the UK from my time there, I used an ecosystem play around looking at, the essential, ecosystem definition of, who has access to the customers you want to go after. So, what I did was we got in that era, we got everyone who could have influence to more gym owners into the gym themselves. So from talking about from the pub manager to the sports shop owners to the nutrition companies, I got them all into the gym. I got them a part of it. We got them PT going. They're becoming huge evangelists for it. And so every time someone would go into one of his shops or touch points around it, people would notice them. They're like, hey, you're in great shape. What are you doing? I'd be like, I've been working at this gym. It's been great, fantastic. Check it out. And then they go to the sports shop and buy some shoes. Oh, you look great around it. And then the adage of over time was, like, hey, can we put up this little sign about what this is? Oh, yeah, no worries. And then next, a month later, I'd have this huge billboard in their shop. And so I ended up with this guerrilla marketing tactics that with complete amplification across the whole area around this evangelism to drive it in with zero marketing budget.
I mean, loved hearing that story. And I was fascinated by people's kind of unique journeys. And one thing that's like clear in listening to you is that the skill of recognizing people around you in your ecosystem that you can work with so you can all be elevated seemingly is a natural skill. Like you were in, an outbound SDR type role, beating your head against a drum. And everyone's kind of got to go through the ringer, like with those like entry level jobs. You learn a lot in those roles, but then you quickly are like, well, this isn't an efficient way to scale, right? What is? And you recognize pretty early on the concept of like referrals from partnerships and tapping into their customer base. So I'm curious for anyone listening who, maybe struggles to understand how to like look at their ecosystem and understand how could we all work together to be elevated. Like, do you have any advice for people to think that way? Because it's candidly not a natural skill to develop.
Yeah, good question, Chris. So I presented to a sales training organization we worked with down here last week to say to sellers, right? And like, what could you do? And I'll come back to a point I made just earlier around, who has access to the customers that you want to go after. And if you think of 2 to 3 organizations who are close to the core of what you offer, build those relationships alongside them with just 2 or 3 to sort of get going, like as initial,
right?
And work out, if you're selling this, who else is in market that's also targeting the same audience to sell something complementary, and go build those relationships bilaterally. It's such a low use of your time, but they are doing the same role or very similar. Find out what they're trying to achieve and make those connections and build them deep. Because I always say to people, well, if you can get these 2 or 3 relationships alongside you, strong, deep, you're offering back to themselves, you need to think of them like they're part of your team. Like that they kind of not work for you, but they're the ones who open up opportunities and provide, that adage, Jared used to go on about like, intel, influence and intros. Like just do that with 2 or 3 people and you've 3x the opportunities around inside your ecosystem just as a starting point.
Yeah. We're going to unpack that later on, but I think that's a really important call it. I love how you kind of simplify what that really looks like, because I think people overcomplicate it. But let's get back to kind of continuing on your journey, right? You walked us through those early moments where you realized like, okay, partnerships done right can be a growth engine, not just a kind of a side hustle for sales. So let's talk about the kind of the first kind of pain points that you had to go through. And I know in particular, one of them was like going too broad, too fast, right? Mm-hmm. So like what happened there and how did that ultimately shape how you think and focus now?
Yeah, well, you realize it's, you get really busy being busy, right? Like what is the impact you're doing? You're going broad and weak. You're not going deep, and meaningful. So, one thing we sort of work on a lot of companies we're working with is, quality over quantity. How can you 10x those that are close and tight to you, to help each other win? And, it seems to be like something which is easily, forgotten. So many companies like go recruit more partners. Well, why? You're going to have 100 partners sitting on the bench with ghost agreements. It's so common.
I mean, my ears are lighting up. If you can see us right now, because if you were to ask me, Bryan, hey, what's the single, only one biggest mistake partner companies are making that's costing them the most? And if I can only pick one of the hundreds, it's trying to work with too many partners, right? Okay. Or working with the wrong partners. And I really want to dig into this, right? Like help the audience understand just how costly it is to focus on too many partners versus, doing the right thing of like, hey, have we really squeezed the sponge dry with those other 5 partners that we spent a lot of time signing and onboarding? Or like really help us understand, Bryan, because it's crazy how at every level, CEO, CRO, VP of partnerships, head of partnerships, partnership manager, a lot of people, are confused and think the path to growth is more partners. Mm-hmm. So few people actually say, you know what, how about we squeeze the sponge dry as much as we can for our most promising partners? I really want you to help us debunk this.
Yeah. So companies always look at TAM, SAM, SOM for their customers, right? But if you're building a bottom-up plan looking at your TAM, SAM, SOM for partners, then what is the SOM of the partners for it? Now, if you've got to go produce partner-sourced revenue of a certain amount or whatever the impact of it is, which partners can go deliver that? Now, it's not a case of more volume of partners to sort of say, oh, we've got this huge SAM, which you never convert to SOM to never get your actual bottom-up plan to achieve that. So, recently been chatting to HubSpot down here across the region. You've got 2 levers. We want to drive more partner-sourced growth from our solution partners. Now, we've got 2 levers to do it. It's very simple. Let's go and build the capabilities of our existing solution partners, or we go and recruit a bunch more to do it. Now, the thing that people forget very quickly and needs to be over communicated back up into the business is no one really cares about your partner program. And the more you go and recruit more and more and more, what you're actually doing is you're promising all these benefits to a bigger pool of partners.
You're diluting them.
You're diluting it massively. So as a company, you have a finite amount of opportunities of what you can offer back through partner programs, strategic partners. So if you go deep with a select few, we can fill up, you can rinse it, like you sort of said, and unlock the partner song within them. Go do that.
Yeah.
Just go deep with a select few.
Yeah, I love this. This is honestly one of my favorite topics to have. And I agree with everything you said. And Bryan, maybe you'll resonate with how I put it when I teach this problem to like advise, like C-suites that I advise and VPs. It's like, hey, look, in a SaaS environment, let's just focus there. What are the two levers for like revenue growth? Acquire new customers and get more revenue from your existing customers. Those are the two levers. And they say, yeah, I agree with that. I'm like, okay, cool. Which one is more expensive to do? Right. And they're like, well, of course, acquire net new customers, right? Because you got marketing, you got sales, etc. So I'm like, well, that's the same thing with your partner program, right? Which should you want to invest in? Do you want to go acquire net new partners, or do you want to get more revenue from your existing partners? And they're like, oh, I get it now, right? So it's like, if it's so obviously understood when you talk about customer acquisition from the company level, everyone seems to understand that. But like, it's baffling to me how when you apply that same logic to your partner program, seemingly everyone forgets first principles, right? Where it is more expensive to acquire net new partners than it is to then get more value from your existing partners. Does that kind of resonate?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's clearly articulated. It's a good way to envision. The other thing I would add to that, Chris, just building on it, is companies will go set up a very standardized sales organization. I'm talking outbound sales, right? SDRs, we've got MQLs on top from marketing, driving, or events, and what all the things we're doing. Then we've got SDRs, we've got AEs, account managers for it. And then they say, well, let's just leave the partnership individual contributor over on the side. And rather than this whole process and sales ops and all the things to flow through in the CRM, you just go deliver everything by yourself and just contribute that 20-30% of that. And can you do that next week? Right. So there's no partnerships framework around how do you actually operationalize the partnership flow to go with that. Right. And, that is the opportunity for all of us to, there's one thing to grow, deepen, build relationships with partners. But if you're an individual contributor, it's so critical that you over communicate internally of the role of partnerships, the impact of it, and the breadth that they can do to make an impact. Like I've got a presentation to a C-suite next week. We're just finalizing some work on, and marketing. Reach with partners is significantly more than doing it all yourself in your budget for it. Customer success, it's a case of you don't have as much support demand. You don't have to hire as many people. The more we can bring partners. Sales, we can we can co-sell and bring emotions in. All the things that you and I know, but you need everyone across the business bought into around what it is. It's not all about partner source and influence growth. It goes so much wider.
I totally agree with that, and appreciate that breakdown. I'll ask you, like, this wasn't in the interview script, but let me ask you a question related to what you just said. Who, in your opinion, you have to pick one person, Bryan, who, in your opinion, is it their job and responsibility to unite the whole organization around partnerships, right? Because this is a polarizing debate. You got the rise of the chief partnership officer as one candidate example. Maybe it's the CEO. So in your opinion, where does the buck stop? Who ultimately is most responsible for, let's just focus on like mature companies like product market fit and beyond. Who is responsible for uniting the company around that ecosystem strategy, right? Because it's seemingly every company is looking at each other like the Spider-Man meme, like who's responsible? So we'd love to hear from you and who you think that is.
It's whoever's in charge of revenue up the top, right? Like it sits with,
I like that.
And the reason why is that, firstly, no one's trying to fail. Right, let's start with that. Like, I really like Jocko Willink's book, where he talks about extreme ownership. And you got to think like, anyone that gives you a leader, like, hey, here's 30% of revenue, go do that. They don't want to fail. Like, I spoke to a CFO last week, and they're like, when there's some strategy work is, well, we need you to deliver this amount of revenue. That person, the CFO, does not want to report to the board that partnerships didn't deliver and they didn't deliver on their number.
Right.
However, a secondary person to that, so whoever owns the revenue number up top across all channels is the person. However, if someone's in a partnerships role, individual contributor, VP of partnerships, whatever, it's up to them to be accountable to go spread that message far and wide, to manage up accordingly to it. Because that CFO, I'm telling you, or the CRO is not going to go sit in that board meeting and sort of say, we missed our number. And then they try and, we'll just go fire the person because they didn't deliver.
Fair. I appreciate you taking a firm stance on that. And I tend to agree that it really should be the foremost responsible person on the revenue org. I think that's a sound answer. And I'll be interested to see what our community thinks about that. So now let's keep going down the journey, right? And you had a really great stint in kind of like corporate kind of biz dev, partnerships, et cetera. And then at some point you decide to make the leap, ultimately start your business, Hockey Stick Advisory, which I love because, you didn't just go, hey, I'm going to do freelance partner consulting, which that's a great path for a lot of folks, especially as a side hustle, but you've ultimately built a business and a model around it, right? So my next question for you, Bryan, is what was the gap that you saw in the market that made you think, you know what, companies need this and they're not getting it anywhere else? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, great question, Chris. So it developed over a few years of building on a curiosity. So when I was at Vend point of sale, which got acquired by Lightspeed in 2022, started off early sales and account management and growing the book of business. And, we saw that companies which were using all connected apps and technology players, they were growing, all the benefits we know of, staying with us longer, bigger accounts, happier. And I was like, hang on, okay, so this is flying on from what I'd seen earlier. And then when I got to go work at Xero's ecosystem as in a sort of scale up mode and grow from 100 partners through to about 1,200 for about a 5-year tenure. And so
Crazy.
I had the opportunity to sort of see the lens of like what was working or what wasn't working through a lot of these upcoming companies. And I think as an industry, we always talk about the halos of like, oh, let's look at what HubSpot's doing, what's Atlassian and Salesforce, the hyperscalers. But surrounding each of these ecosystems and, following either like, Jay or Roman stuff, 16 plus tech ecosystems, they've all got thousands of apps working around building point vertical solutions, which are vying for the attention of the ecosystem. So
Right.
my experience with Xero, the farming apps would say, hey, can we do an EDM out to everyone in farming? Hair and beauty apps would say, hey, we've got this conference next week. Can you just pay for most of it? The next vertical reporting apps, hey, can we just do a presentation to your sales team next week? We've just dropped a new feature. It'd be great. And so I saw this time and time again of these upcoming companies who were maturing in their own product features, wanting to partner, and the effectiveness of it was nascent. And so, being based in Melbourne, I started finding myself doing a lot of consulting presentations to other boardrooms. Xero down here across the APAC region is really revered in the same way HubSpot is in North America. So we're going to board and like, this is how I built the ecosystem over time. I started just spreading this general knowledge. And I thought, this is really interesting that other companies are trying to figure it out in the wake. And as a case study, we're seeing all these upcoming companies have a go at partnerships, but I would see that the partnership people turn over in the same way that we know as well. And we'd have these running jokes that like, hey, at the next conference, they're wearing a different, tech t-shirt. They're over there now. Last year over here. What's going on? And so I thought it was where do companies go and learn partnerships to be more effective? And so that's where I made the strategic move a bit over 3 years ago to go launch this. And there wasn't people out there like yourself, Chris, are out there educating the markets around to be able to do better. And so that's what we've been doing. We've been building the capability of companies to how to build towards partnership ecosystem, but also into the leadership level around what is the role of partnerships, how to play, and how to structure it alongside your go-to-market methods that you've got today.
Well, I love hearing that story, Bryan, and I have a ton of respect, obviously, for the business that you've built. Being in the same kind of category, so to speak, in building my business. So, ton of respect for you as a trailblazer, and I think it's inspiring for anyone listening who is following in a similar path, where it's like, hey, look, like you're becoming a highly competent kind of operator in the confines of a full-time corporate environment. But if you sense this gap is in the market, that you have a niche that you can fill, then Bryan's giving you a really good roadmap to kind of branch out, at least start a side hustle and then potentially into a full-time hustle. So that was a great breakdown, Bryan, of kind of how it started. but how did you validate it early, right? Was there a first client or a first project where you thought, oh, shit, this works, right? We can really, there's runway here. What did that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I started it whilst I was still in my Xero role for what it was. So I had two or three clients to sort of get going, Chris. I was very fortunate that I had a public-facing role at Xero. So I had a ready network for it, and I was already on the speaking as sort of a part of that role. So with a playbook that I'd sort of emerged through sort of lockdown, some consulting, people paying for that, I was like, hey, this works. There's demand. I then I had a profile, so I already had an audience. And then the third thing I know just from a role, a lot of venture capitalists in Australia. And so I sent 10 of them an email. Hey, I'm looking to go start out partnership ecosystem, build capability for other tech companies. Would there be some within your network that I could chat to? And a few of them, which I'm still very grateful to today, provided me introductions to CEO and founders to about half a dozen. And, without really trying, I suddenly had discovery calls, and I had we've vetted down the funnel companies who are interested, like, yeah, would love to work for you. And so having done a few works around it, I had an active pipeline ready to launch with and build behind and go at it, right? And so from there, I basically haven't stopped and haven't looked back. And you just, as always, and as you're going through, Chris, you're always building and, thinking about the next thing, from those early days of in Europe, from outbound to referrals, like it's, where I'm at today and where we're going is continue to evolve.
Love that. I love that breakdown. There's a few key things to unpack there for anyone perhaps who's interested in following a similar path as Bryan and then myself of, hey, like kind of starting your own kind of service type business. I think a few things there. I think I do advise people like, hey, like, I would encourage you to get something started while you still have a full-time job, right? Yeah. Just to kind of protect yourself against cash flow. Like, you can take it or leave that advice. But then also the importance of building your network, right? Like network equals net worth is cheesy, but I do think it takes years to kind of get that going. So you want to start, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is today, right? Yep. So like get started. But to continue on that evolution, Bryan, right? Like from you doing strategy solo, then you go full time on your business, and then building a team that actually execute the full partnership framework. Like help those listening who might be inspired to kind of build their own kind of business and brand. What did the growth phase look like? Like, you leave Xero, now you're full time on this business. Like what did that kind of transition look like going into growth mode?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer in learning from those ahead of you. The saying of course, whatever. So careful where you get your advice from is first thing. Be mindful of toxic positivity in a good way. And what I mean by that is, Chris, great job. I love what you do and keep at it, from someone who sits in a corporate cushy role. Like it's well,
that doesn't help me.
and it's a pat on the back, and you're like, that's nice. And then they just take their paycheck and go home early. Rather than speaking to someone who's 2 to 5 years in of operating this model and, what is cash flow? How do you have runway? What is, your tax, your P&L? What is your 3-month? What is your burn rate? To actually understand the mechanics of operating a business. So that, for anyone thinking about this, you cannot underestimate that. It is a quantum gap to go from a full-time employee, to running your own business in this model to do it. So that's an ongoing learning. So, to answer your question, the first year I had a personal brand coach who was a few years ahead of me, who provided ongoing guidance and most importantly, accountability. What are you working on here? What is this? What about this aspect? And like any good coach or guidance mentor, it helps you see around corners. And we still have a business coach today, which I was on a call with last night around how we're evolving our offerings and how do we do more and be more. Because in a full-time role, you got responsibilities here, but it's a different game. It is a different game.
Yeah, I love that. Going through similar stages myself. So I think that's a great framework for others to kind of follow in that footstep. Like get as much advice as you can, but also be careful and kind of parse that advice to kind of qualify it. So that's kind of how you got the business rolling. Now let's get into the good stuff, which is the partnership frameworks that you're becoming famous for now. So let's dig into that, the partnership framework itself, because I think that's where a lot of people can steal value from. Mm-hmm. So the next point blank question for you, Bryan, is what are the main stages of your kind of partnership framework itself? And what are you diagnosing in those first 30 days with a client?
Yeah, sure. So we're breaking it into 5 pillars, which is nearly about over a 6 month period. And the goal is that we're building the partnership foundations alongside your other go-to-market motions in a very intentional, chronological way. So the first phase we kick off with, which we call align. And, what the hell does that mean? We spend a lot of time thinking about it's not about building a strategy playbook and then off you go, because companies will just go back to like, where's the leads next week, right? So it's got to start with that leadership level. Now, when we say align, we're talking about it on two sides of the coin. What does the partnerships mean internally? Like what do we actually want it to do? What resources do we have? What is the size of the ecosystem? Where are we going to play? What does our partner categories look like? And then starting to have a model of around like, okay, we're ready to go. We know what partnerships is, and then get everyone bought in on the bus around what that is. And so during that phase, it's critical. We always start off with a leadership workshop, which we mandate for a half day of, what is the role of partnership? And no surprise, Chris, you go around the room, the head of sales will say, I want partnerships to fire me consistent leads. I don't really have time to talk to them. And, we want them to work with
Go
us.
figure.
We're awesome. It's foundational. And it's some of those light bulb moments, which you mentioned before, of getting into a CEO, founder, and MD's head of like, why would someone partner with us? And they're like, oh, well, I don't know. Well, hang on, I don't know. And then we kick into what we call a validate phase, where we run a sprint, where we go pressure test our partner value proposition, which we've rebuilt and done some market research and learnings, and we've done surveys to our customers. What else do you need around it? Which I think it should always be customer led. We check with our partners around, what do you want from us? From the top partners, the ideal partners, for this validate phase. So then before a partner program or rebuilding a partner program, we've actually got something on the table which is of value. Because if I say, I always put it to you, Chris, if I say to you like, hey, I want to partner with you, hey, can we get on a call and do something? You're like, well, I've got 100 things to do. But if you're not, throwing something over the table, I think a really good one for an individual contributor partner manager is go find out who are your partners' partners.
Yeah. Map the ecosystem of your ecosystem effectively.
Yeah. It's so simple, because they're spending their time, and we've just been going on about like, hey, you should make sure it's critical work with less partners and go deeper. Well, if they are actually doing that, then unless you bring something to the table which is attractive, of value, it helps them win personally and the company win from the get-go, and validate that. And doesn't that stem the basis of a great partner program?
100%. I love that line. And going back to like, I love how you kind of have that like mandated like half day workshop, and then you kind of hear people's perspective of kind of relationship with respective partnerships. The sales thing, I love sales, and we need sales. Don't get me wrong, but I've always have a bit of perplexity when it comes to sales, especially once you're actually delivering quality pipeline that closes, right? Like pre that happening, sales can be as skeptical as they want, right? Because they haven't won yet. Their bank account hasn't benefited from you yet. But once we're driving that pipeline, it's crazy to me that AEs and sales managers are so slow to like really buy into us, because in many cases, as you know, Bryan, we have the same exact quota model, right? Closed won cash hitting the company bank account. And by the way, we're the ones filling up your pipeline, top of funnel. We're helping those deals close with influence. We're filling up your calendar. So I'm curious, Bryan, this is an aside question. Why is it that the relationship between partnerships and sales is so slow to develop, given that of all the other functions that we collaborate with, we have the closest parallels? Like we have same quota models, same comp models, right? We're both connected in the funnel. So like help us understand what's missing.
Yeah. It's as simple as KPIs drive behavior. And so for a sales team member, I've got to hit my number and do this right now. And with my targets, transactional, and then I go home. So unless, do I want to chat to that partner over there? Well, that's not my KPI today, right? So we mitigate and solve that by through the align phase and getting the leadership saying that partnerships will not deliver what you want to unless we have top-down support to do that. In order to do that, we need to put an OKR into the top of your sales team to drive it. One project we're working at the moment, we're mandating for all new business renewals that a growing partner attach of the sales team ongoing over the next few quarters. So we're changing the sales DNA to be a partner-led company. And going back to that transactional nature, AE's got a role, SDR's got a role, sales manager for it. What I find as it grows, exactly what you said, Chris, there's usually one or two AEs that get it. And then like the penny drops. And then all of a sudden they're like killing it compared to the others. And there's this quantum upside once they get it. And then there's a tailwind of everyone else like, oh, how do I do that? Or how do I do that to go with it? But to crack the nut on it, KPIs drive behavior, mandate it from the top down, which is why you've got to get that buy-in from the leadership level early in.
Yeah, I love that. So two great takeaways from that segment there from Bryan. The KPIs drive the behavior. So it's not enough to just have aligned quota elements. Like the fact that, hey, our quotas are basically the same, close one revenue, and we're both on like contingent commission structures. That's not enough is what Bryan's saying. You really need to kind of align the KPIs. And I've lived that experience like on the customer success side. Customer success reps are typically the ones who refer leads to your partners because they're in that like important relationship owner role. So I remember one breakthrough I was finally able to have with our head of CS was, hey, look, can you like our CSMs had a KPI of like 3 cross sells in a quarter, so to speak. And he agreed to retire that quota if they were to refer leads to partners. So we basically were treating partner referrals almost like a cross sell, right? And once he did that for me, Bryan, to your point, that was a game changer because then all the CS are like, wow, like I can just press that button. And it's actually easier for me to refer quality leads to my partner than it is to cross sell our, flimsy solution. So I love how you said the KPIs drive the behavior, and I've lived it. Quota is not enough. There's too much of a lag, right? When quota gets hit, the leading KPIs sounds like that's the important place to get right.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if it's got the top-down support around the why, and you've answered that, and everyone's like, I get what partnerships is, they're on the bus. So then what happens if you don't get that buy-in and understanding, what happens is, I've gone through this process. One of the early clients we work with, I love partnerships. It's great. We're all invested. A month later, they had a board meeting. They're nervous. How come partnership hasn't delivered yet? I said, let's go back to this slide, which in this asset, which we co-built and we signed off on this together. The role is that we're building this capability, but it's not this turnkey transactional thing. Let's build the KPIs into it, because to your point, leading indicators, lagging indicators around what is the outputs that we're getting towards. It's got to go in that order, which is why our sort of framework, we've sort of stepped it out in that way, because you can't, companies usually jump to like the third pillar we've got, which is like, activate, which is like, let's go do everything with partners and get busy and like, chat to them and bug everyone. Well, hang on. Well, you haven't validated it. No one's aligned internally. You've set yourself on a pathway to get fired or quitting in frustration, right?
Yeah, I love that. That was really fun combo. So we're just going to keep it going, right? So you gave us the great frameworks, kind of the early phase of your engagement with a client. Now let's talk about scaling for growth, right? And you said, sorry. So say a team's nailed the basics, right? And they're ready to go faster. You've got this scaling for growth series, right? What does that look like in practice to help clients go from like, okay, we've got the foundations. Now how do we actually scale for growth?
Yeah. So firstly, previous phase, we set up mutual success plans and we go deep on those with the select few partners which we choose to go with. It's not a case of scattergun to anything, right? Like, how do you build it? Think about your sales team. It's very, methodical around how do you go about it. So picture your top partners. How do you actually build a plan ongoing where you can do things systematically? The goal of partnerships is really predictable, sustainable, partner-led growth in most aspects. So picture being able to get this going with a certain number of partners with an always-on method to be able to run a cash flow forecast out 3 years and sort of say, this is the value of partnership. That's also the recipe, if you can crack that nut, to get more investment, because a CFO can sign off on that. Oh, yeah, this is what you're building towards. So mutual success plans. Now, what that means to us, it's not about QBRs. I've got a strong stance is QBRs is all about updating a nice shiny slide deck about what you've done, dropping in your features of what you've done, doing an update. It's a bit of a show and tell.
Posturing.
In a primary school environment. Whereas a mutual success plan is, what do you want to achieve next quarter? What are we doing together around what your side? Your whole goal of it is to unlock organizational buy-in on both sides. Because if there's a committed plan in place, then you've actually got something you can stand behind that you're ready to sort of scale up and grow with. Now, if you're able to do that with a select few partners in a programmatic way, then you've got a dependable model that you're actually able to bring to life to sort of scale it up. And what does that look like?
Yeah, I love that. I totally agree. And that really is the right kind of systematic approach. You can't skip steps. And so the follow-on question to that, Bryan, is like, what are those quick wins you're aiming for early, right? Versus the longer plays that might take a year, because that's a challenge in someone in your capacity in like an advisory consulting position is like, hey, you have to balance like these clients need to feel some type of wins early on to justify your existence, if we're just being honest. But then you also are being realistic and strategic to kind of set them up for for longer term play. So what are those quick wins you're aiming for early?
Yeah. So like if you look at like a 2x2 of like, who's all your partners in the round? You've been through, this is our ecosystem. This is our partner categories. These are the players we want to do some things with. You put them in a metric of like holy grail partner. Now, Chris, I think you've had some images on this in the past, right?
Yeah.
Spend a lot of time on this with the next best choice partners, right? Go hard. Like, so what that means for us is with a similar size or maybe slightly smaller, serves a similar ICP, is hungry and eager to do stuff with us. They're the ones that go press go on a few initiatives to show some momentum. Let's go get a webinar out with them. Let's do some shared blogs, emails with them. Let's get some activity. It's tactical. It's fast turnaround. It's low effort. You get high exposure. You're generating some, we talk about MQLs, SQLs. I sometimes talk to C-suites that I understand. We're going to talk about, PQLs, partner qualified leads, right? Way down. So let's get some tactical things out the door to show like, wow, hey, we did this stuff with this partner and we've got all these new leads opportunities, which we haven't had exposure to or access to. And now we're following up and there's some really good people we haven't chatted to, because you're able to sort of tell that narrative to do more. By the way, we're building it programmatically over here about how do we pour it on for, grow the momentum.
I like that. That's a really structured kind of directional approach, which I think you have to take to kind of justify the existence of the investment by the company's perspective. So I really like that approach. We're going to transition into one of our final segments here, which is going to be a fun, quick hitting session. So these will be kind of more rapid fire again, but on point with partnerships. So we're calling this one myths, mindset shifts, and must kills, right? And this is going to be focusing on kind of your client work. So the first one is recruit more partners and the revenue will follow, right? Why is that statement wrong?
Because you've got to, every time you recruit more partners, you're weakening your partner value proposition because you're promising more to more partners. The end.
Amazing. Nailed that one. All right, cool. Next one. One-off initiatives. What's the danger on that?
It's a flash in the pan and next month you've got nothing to show for it.
Love it. You're absolutely crushing this, Bryan. Third one. Partner productivity versus partner acquisition. Why is productivity the metric that really matters?
It unlocks organizational buy-in to actually move the needle rather than just noise.
Love it. Absolutely. And then I want, a hot take here, if you can give one. If your partner value prop is weak, what's the hard truth about your job security?
Well, how long are you going to last? Why are partners going to talk to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And drill down on that for us, Bryan. Like, what's the simplest way to completely revamp your partner value prop? Right? Because you've done a great job explaining directly and indirectly how important it is to get that right. So like, what is the shortest path to a much more refined partner value prop, which you need to take to market to engage and sign partners in the first place?
You need to validate, and that is go chat to your partners, run a quantitative survey to your ideal partners and find out what they want and where they spend their time. From there, you can have a data-driven approach around what the partner value proposition could be, and look at your partners, like we said before.
I love that. I totally agree. And one thing I always say in a variety of capacities, like you need to prove it with one, right? Like you can't get your 10th customer without getting your first one. You can't get your 10th partner without getting your first one. You can't get your 10th deal without getting that first one. So I put such a premium on, hey, prove it with one, like really cleverly designed, like design partner or whatever you want to call it. And you learn so much from them, what's right, what's wrong about your hypothesis that you can then take to scale. So I appreciate that breakdown. And then just a couple quick hitters on the leadership side, and then we'll wrap up. Zooming out for a second, you've seen so many great leaders up close, you being one of them yourself. What is it that they do differently, right? Like we all have the same amount of time in the day. We all have similarly, the same type of resources at our companies. But what is it about those top elite partner leaders that separates them from the rest?
You need to evangelize internally to get company buy-in. So get on the weekly stand-up, the town halls, and go show the impact of partners. Partners did this in terms of comms and spread our message. In marketing, we helped drive this together. We've got all of these events upcoming. These partners delivered fruit. And so for every cross-functional department, you're the activator. Partnerships accelerates the company strategy. It's not an island, as we know, Chris, right? Which we're doing our best to help the industry move forward.
Love that. Second last question for you for the whole interview. What's one trend in partnerships that you're optimistic about that you think is here to stay? You think it's a really positive trend where you're seeing more companies do this or more operators and individuals do this? You can take that in any direction, but is there any trend that you're noticing that you're like, you know what, I'm glad to see it and I want to help purvey it?
Yeah, I think just go deep, not broad. In an AI-enabled world of diluted
100%
trust and relationships, turning insights into action, the opportunity for partnerships is to the network that you all have becomes an asset. And that's for you personally, for your current job, your next job, and where things are going. Can't underestimate that.
I think I love that, especially in the AI world. I think the concept of like productivity, efficiency, density, these are all things that are going to become more and more relevant. Companies are going to expect you to deliver more output per employee, which means you need to get more output per partner managed, so to speak. So I'm glad you said that, because I totally would have chosen the same one, Bryan. Last question for you. If listeners of this episode remember one thing from this conversation, what should it be?
Like Arnold Schwarzenegger says in his book, be useful.
Be useful. I love that. Be useful. Might get that tattooed on me. Like, that's just a great job security 101, right? Like, if you be useful, it's, people will forget a lot of the details, but they won't forget when you were useful, especially when it mattered most. So I'm glad you left us off there. But look, Bryan, this has truly been awesome. For folks, who want to learn more about Partnerships Framework, I highly recommend you follow Bryan on LinkedIn and check out the Hockey Stick Advisory, and certainly to get engaged if you're looking for some support. But thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Definitely hit subscribe and follow wherever you're listening. And Bryan, seriously, thank you so much for a really fun conversation.
Thanks, Chris. Good to tee up some time to talk.
Amazing.